We've actually been gifted quite a few surprises when it comes to the automotive world in 2022. And even though we might have fallen on opposite sides of the fence on some of the car announcements, I think we are still in some sort of agreement that there has been some significant wins this year. And for the first time in a long time, we have some new platforms coming forward that we can look forward to that actually have some potential. And it really starts to beg the question, at least in my mind, of which one is going to come out on top in the next few years as these things start to hit the market. And of course, start to get some modifications thrown at them. At the beginning of the year, we were introduced to the latest evolution of the Subaru WRX. It's a little joke there if you didn't catch it, Evo WRX. Anyway, and as we all know, the launch didn't go so well. The plastic cladding, the square fender arches, the Honda Civic taillights didn't really sit well with a lot of people who were looking forward to the next generation of the WRX. They waited so long for the announcement, they waited so long for the car to come out, and then they got this thing. Also, not to mention, the announcement too that there's not going to be an STI, however, I don't think it gives us the right quite yet to give up on the WRX. There's still some pretty impressive things about this car and gives it a nice leg up on the previous generation. With a revamped 2.4 liter pushing 271 horsepower out of the box, it shouldn't be something that gets really glossed over. It truly is just some of the exterior and interior decisions that were made that, left a not so good impression. Granted, companies like Aeroflow Dynamics have taken one for the team here and have really been working on some replacement parts and pieces to make this thing look a little bit better. And honestly, I think they've done a really good job so far. It's hard to argue the fact, though, that you're buying a brand new car. And, you should at least enjoy the way that it looks from the factory and not have to spend a ton of money to make a stock version better, if that makes sense. Modify your car, but it's a little bit different. But to each your own. I think people will come around to this car. I know a ton of aftermarket companies are already hopping onto this platform to make some good stuff for them, which will only help. And as soon as more of these start popping up at shows and online, it will only help the public's overall perception of it as well. But I will say, I'm just not quite sold on it just yet. Speaking of Boxster engines, I think it's only right to throw in the GR86 into the mix as well. We saw the newest BRZ hit the market before the Toyota variant was released, simply because Toyota was just like, you know what, it's just not ready yet. We don't like it that much yet. We want to make it better. And honestly, I can really appreciate that. As a previous owner of a 2013 Scion FRS, I really did fall in love with the platform. When the news broke of a next generation coming out, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of nervous. I'm like, don't ruin it, man. It's so good. However, I think they did an incredible job. And everyone that I've talked to who has driven or picked up one of these things have really said the same thing. They really do like the car. It's a very good evolution of the car. And even though the rumors of like a turbocharger or some sort of forced induction never came to fruition, I think it did help keep the car what it was meant to be, which is an affordable rear-wheel drive sports coupe. And you know damn well, if they would have slapped a turbo on this thing, it would have been like 40 to 45 grand. The new BRZ and GR86 took everything that made the first generation, so damn good, and it took it a little bit further. An updated interior, some nice styling to the exterior, a 2.4 liter engine that got rid of that nasty torque dip that the 2 liter had. In my opinion, it's a proper sequel to the first cars that came out in 2013. Now, Gazoo Racing has made quite the impact in the last few years. I think it's pretty fair to say that, from the GR Supra to the GR86, and now, of course, the much awaited GR Corolla. 3-cylinder, that's right, 3-cylinder, turbocharged, all-wheel drive hatch, make it 300 horsepower. I mean, there really isn't much to knock, on the car there. We've all been saying year over year that they need to do something with the Corolla hatchback. It looks too good to be that slow. And they did. Thank you, Toyota, for listening. The only, downside you could say here is that there might not be a ton of aftermarket support available right away. With a brand new engine, brand new drivetrain, it's gonna take a little bit, for a variety of parts to hit the market, and not to mention what could potentially happen to these things when you do add power to them. But they do seem incredibly fun right out of the box, and I think it's gonna be one of the top contenders of the new cars of 2022. So we talked a lot about Toyota, we talked a lot about Subaru. Let's take, a break from that, talk about Nissan for a second. Of course, we're gonna throw the new Nissan Z in there. Now, this is one of those cars that has been teased again and again and again, and renders have been thrown out left and right of what it could be. But finally, we have confirmation what the car actually is and what it actually looks like. Now, I feel like this is another one that kind of split the community a little bit. Some people aren't a huge fan of the front end, you know, the grille and the headlights specifically, but personally, I think they absolutely killed it with this car. It's a perfect blank canvas with a lot of potential for whatever, you know, style you want to go with. Backed up with a strong power plant and a manual transmission, I think it really set the car up for success. Now, I do remember specifically one of the main buzz around these cars is how affordable it will be. And unfortunately, I think they kind of missed the mark a little bit on that one, or at least we're kind of a little weird about how it all went with like the different trim levels and stuff. Like, yeah, you could, you know, maybe get one of these for like 40 grand, but the one you're gonna want is gonna be like 50. Which leaves us with one more car that just recently got unveiled. Of course, that's the new Civic Type R. We just did a whole video on that. Sam and Dakota got their thoughts out on it. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the introduction of the newest Civic, and I guess the Integra, if you wanted to throw that in there, wasn't the most exciting announcement. It was just kind of like another, oh, okay. However, I think the Type R makes up for all of that. It's like the previous generation of the Type R had its like 30th birthday and went through a little bit of a quarter life crisis, but came out a better person. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy the last Type R. I did really enjoy it, but I also really kind of like the new one. It's almost a little bit of a polar opposite, where the last one was so aggressive and had a ton of factory aero, and it kind of left not so much exterior wise to change up and make your own. And that's where I think this new one is going to shine. Again, a little bit more of a blank canvas. However, I do feel that this car is going to fall into a bit of the same fate as the previous one, where dealers are going to absolutely go insane with the prices on these things and kind of hold them hostage to get as much money as they can. And that's, of course, just only going to hurt us. So honestly, it might be a few years before we really start to see these things become more available, but we never know. But if, you know, things are looking the way that they're looking and the way that the last Type R went, it could kind of fall into that same, like I said, fate. So I think that those are some of the top contenders. Now, I know there's a lot of like USDM stuff. Of course, there's a lot of Euro stuff that's coming out. But I think, you know, overall, when we look at like the announcements of cars this last year and the impacts that they've made in the car scene, these are some of the biggest, heaviest hitters that really made like a shock in the community. So with all that being said, what are my predictions as far as like the outcome of, and I think it really comes down to a few factors. Number one is going to be, of course, the availability of these things. So it's like, when are they going to be available? It seems that everything is almost sort of like a hype drop nowadays. It's like if you're not on like a waiting list because you know someone who paid someone, and you know, you do YouTube for a living and you got like all the parts ready to go from someone that had early access to the car because they knew the engineer of the car and they already have a wide body kit made up, they got suspension for it, you're not going to get your hands on one, or at least not for MSRP. So that really, I think, is going to affect cars such as the new Z and the Honda Civic Type R. I think the new Z is going to be the biggest one impacted by this because it's been labeled like the super killer since its initiation. The Civic Type R, on the other hand, like I mentioned, I think is going to fall to that fate of the previous one where the dealerships are going to kind of hold them hostage. I think that, you know, you're going to be overpaying for them brand new right out of the gate, and there's nothing that they're going to do to stop that. Like, and then people are just going to flip them, and it's going to be like, okay, who has the most amount of money to go buy a Honda Civic? Like, it's kind of crazy to think about, but I think the car itself is absolutely fantastic. And it kind of goes the same with the Corolla hatch. There's a ton, and I mean a ton, of hype around that car. We finally have a Japanese hot hatch coming into the mix for the first time in quite a while. And it's exciting, and people are excited. But I really think the ones that are gonna come out on top are going to be the new Subaru WRX and the GR86. And for a couple reasons. There hasn't been a ton of hype around them. Like, yes, they're both very popular cars. However, I think the exterior styling of the WRX kind of killed a lot of that hype. And I think a lot of people were a little disappointed in it, but there still are gonna be people who are gonna pick these up and they're gonna modify the ever-living shit out of them. And it's gonna be one of those things where like you see one modified and you're gonna be like, you know what, it's not that bad. And the prices aren't going to be as affected, I really don't think. So I think that's gonna be one that really does kind of sneak its way to the top. And then of course, up there with the GR86. It's an overall fantastic car. The price isn't insane or absurd. They're pretty easy to get their hands on. I think that is my prediction. let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And of course, if you do end up picking up any of these cars and you need some wheel tire suspension for them, or even some performance parts now, you know where to hit us up, fitmentindustries.com. So drop a comment below what your predictions are, if there's a car that you really, really like this year, or one that was just like, no, that thing freaking sucks. Drop it down in the comment below. We'll make sure to read them. And, you know, yeah, that's all I got. I lost my train of thought. I'm going paramotoring after this for the first time. I don't know what to expect, but I'm gonna like strap an engine on my back, and I got like parachute. So I'm gonna go do that. It has nothing to do with cars, but it sounds pretty fun. So see you guys.